Good evening, everyone. Thank you for waiting. Please welcome Mrs. Diane Pernay and Busaina Kazim.
A shaded view.
Well, I decided to join the Headpieces for Peace because, every time I read the newspapers, I felt helpless about the hatred and the violence. It was as if not doing anything about it was being a part of it. I longed to express my solidarity with others. So 3 years ago, I said to my husband and 9 children, I will be right back.
I had only wanted to join the Galactic Stewardesses because a career as a Galactic Stewardess would, I believe, solve my clothing problem. To slip all one's life into the same clothes without ever having to pay for those clothes out of my own pocket because the company provided them appeared to me ideal. And my aunt, who wanted me to be a policewoman or a museum guard, thought the same way. Anyway, there was no difference in this respect between being a stewardess, a policewoman, or a guard in a cultural museum. But that's not the point. The point is that I got tired of repeating the same movements over and over again. And, well, I do not work as a Galactic Stewardess anymore, but I kept the outfits.
It was very difficult for me to be born bald. Growing up bald is very painful. You always feel like an outsider and alienated by everyone. People stare all the time and treat you differently. So I grew up as an introvert, watching lots of movies by myself, especially musicals. And after I developed empathy for lost causes and marginal characters, and I want a long, straight, curly, fuzzy, naggy, chaggy, rappy, mappy, oily, greasy, fleecy, shining, gleaming, streaming, flax and waxing, not a fuck about it, twisted, beat bread, powder, flour, and confetti, bangle, tangle, spangle, and spaghetti.
I'm like a hi, kinda girl. Hi,
Hey,
hi.
I'm like a hey, kinda girl.
I joined the Headpieces for Peace because she joined. When I met you, I wanted to help you.
Hey, when I met you, I wanted to be you.
I want to
I
smell
want to
like
smell
you.
like you.
Where
would we be without each other?
We
We are each other.
Ain't got no home, ain't got no shoes, ain't got no money, ain't got no class, ain't got no friends, ain't got no schooling, ain't got no work, ain't got no job, ain't got no money, ain't got no mother, ain't got no father, ain't got no children, ain't got no sisters and brothers, ain't got no earth, ain't got no faith, ain't got no church, ain't got no skirt, I ain't got no God.
I joined Headpieces for Peace because there was an empty spot on the pie.
So farewell, farewell hope, and with hope farewell fear. Farewell hope, farewell hope, and with hope farewell fear. So farewell hope, farewell hope, and with hope farewell fear. Farewell and hard, that out of hell leads up to light. Long is the way and hard that out of hell leads.
That film gets me every time. Ladies and gentlemen, Diane Pernay.
Thank you.
So we just watched Jessica Mitrani's Headpieces for Peace and Manish Arora's Holy Holy. And it leads me to my first inquiry as to how you go about programming your festival. What do you consider to be a fashion film? How is it different than any other film?
Basically, it's not different from any other film, aside from the fact that fashion has to be the protagonist. The idea of selecting the films is to show the diverse ways you can express fashion through film. And what it's not is a fashion shoot in motion, because there are often fashion photographers. Every fashion photographer's agent wants them to get out a video camera and become a director, and it's not a natural segue.
So what happens when it's TVC per se, or let's say fragrance commercial, or something that is kind of that middle ground? How do you differentiate? How do you decide?
That's a good question, because I always had that problem. Every year I go, do we separate ads from virals? Or, some years I separate it and say, okay, these are all the ads. And then other years I decide, okay, maybe we just give an advertising prize and we present them all mixed together. A good film is a good film.
So we're here to talk about, the cross-pollination of fashion and film. And these two genres have, since the beginning of, film time, have always had a very exchange-based relationship. Films like Breakfast at Tiffany's, Grey Gardens, The Color of Pomegranates, all kinds of different films have had different types of influences on film. How do you define that relationship between the two worlds?
Well, of course there are some films that have affected fashion a lot, like you mentioned, Grey Gardens. It's not that people are going around getting dressed like Edie Beale, no. But it's affected like fashion shoots and things. There are other films like A Long Time Ago Out of Africa or Breakfast at Tiffany's that have a more direct effect on the way people dress. But in general, I think it's more about how does a designer represent their atmosphere in a film. And I think now more than ever it's used as a communication tool. But it's about making a film that's really a film, not about here's the bag, here's the shoe. It's to create an atmosphere. That's why I chose these two particular films.
I mean, Manish Arora is a designer, and he is now, playing director in this case, and sometimes you see that exchange. But do you usually encounter films that, in terms of process, have that fashion film end product in mind, or do they sometimes just end up being sort of a qualifier film for being a fashion film at your festival?
Well, brands are using fashion films as a way of selling strengthening their brand. I don't know, actually in this film, Manish Arora was the creative director, and that all happened because 3 years ago I asked him, excuse me, to be on the jury for the festival. He watched 3-4 hours of films and he thought, I should make a film for my brand. And then he went out and made a film. He never thought he'd win the grand prize, but he did. And it was a whole interesting process. I don't think most designers actually get behind the camera themselves and make the film. I think they choose a director that fits their universe.
So sort of like Ava DuVernay working with Miu Miu, for example, like that really captured the idea of what that brand is, and it's not necessarily set out to be this, brand film per se.
Absolutely. And actually pointing out Miu Miu and Prada, I think they choose some of the most interesting directors for their films because none of them are fashion photographers. They have really excellent choices.
Why do you think that's particularly interesting? Why does that result in a...
Well, because I want to see a real film. I'm not interested in seeing some fashion photographers, of course, have made the segue, like Ellen von Unworth, Bruce Weber. They were, or Erwin Olaf also made some great films. But in general, I want to see a real director. And the thing is, it's kind of my manif, is that if you're a real director, it's probably going to take you about 5 years to make a feature film from the beginning. So in the meantime, why don't brands go to real directors to make short films instead of going to fashion photographers?
And that's slowly happening, right?
Yes, and I think I'm a pioneer in that.
Well, you're a pioneer in a lot of things, Diane. And maybe we can, use this as a fashion backward to, where you first started. I mean, you've worn pretty much every hat and veil throughout the fashion, trajectory. You've been a photographer. You've been, a costume designer with Amos Gitaï. You've, edited a magazine. You've launched your own brand, and that, that was a huge success story. And obviously, Shaded View on Fashion, the infamous blog, 600,000 views, 10 years ago. And I can't believe it's been 10 years since that kicked off. And now the film festival. It's been 7 years. What made you start this in the first place? Why do a fashion film festival?
It's funny because I guess it was in 2000. Well, actually, it started before that because I moved to Paris in the end of 1990. I got my first mini DV camera in 1991, but I wasn't editing at the time, and I started making little fashion films and kind of lo-fi. That's my style with fashion films, my personal style. And in 2000, I thought about a fashion film festival, and then in 2000 it came up in my mind again because I was now starting to edit the films, and I was looking around to see if there was enough material to make a festival, and there wasn't. And in 2006, I started my first fashion film festival. It was called You Wear It Well. It was more a curated program. We called it a festival, but that was a bit of an exaggeration. It was...
Well, you always blur the lines, right?
Yeah, and in 2008, there was somebody read my blog, actually, David Herman. It wasn't... He read an article about me in a magazine, left a message on my blog, which was at the time that these Africans had broken into my Gmail account and sent letters out to the world that I wanted $3,000.
Did you get any money?
Actually, Bernard William and Bless.
Was that how you started the film festival?
That's it. That's a secret way. It's a new way of crowdfunding.
1.0.
I think I'll try that again, but anyway, I lost my train of thought with that Bernard Wilhelm.
So he answered. He sent you a comment on your blog.
Yes, David. Thank you for bringing me back. David Herman read this article. He sent a message on my blog. I didn't get the message, and a while later he answered some post on the blog. And I answered him back, and he said, would you consider showing your festival at the Jus de Pomme in Paris? And so we met, and we showed it there the first year. But it started out as You Wear It Well, and it ended as A Shade of You on Fashion because I had an LA collaborator that when you'd say urgent would answer a week later. And I realized I was doing everything myself. And I thought, I should just do it myself.
You should just own it.
Yeah, I should just own it, and that's how it started.
So why a shaded view? I've always wondered.
It's kind of, two reasons. One, it's my particular perspective, and two is I always wear shades.
So it's literal and abstract
Yeah,
at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Well, it's really contextually appropriate here, and thank you for your shaded view on Dubai. With coming here, I wanted to kind of look back at that experience when you first set off to do it. You said you had a lot of trouble getting films, getting submissions, getting buy-in. Now you're at the Centre Pompidou. You have a lot of big brands that are represented every year at the festival. You have really great jurors. Has it always been this easy, and or was there a lot of skepticism in the beginning to look at the sort of legitimate form of the fashion film as warranting a festival?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because in the beginning I spent my life explaining what a fashion film is because nobody understood it, and well, that was in the beginning, especially with You Wear It Well, but it's grown so much over the past 3 years. Like I'm working on the 8th year at Centre Pompidou. It'll be the 7th time at Centre Pompidou because the first was Jus de Pomme. And now there isn't a brand around, whether it's an emerging talent or a major brand that isn't using a fashion film as a tool.
What do you think has changed since then, since the beginning, that now it's become a prerequisite almost for every brand to have a fashion film?
Well, obviously it must be working, right? Because, or otherwise they wouldn't be making fashion films. It's exploding. It's not, even reached a peak at this point. It's just something that's constantly growing. I actually have my interns on a research project going back to 2006 when I started the film festival to go through all the brands emerging in major houses to see how many brands are using films now as compared to the past, 8 years, 10 years.
What are the findings so far?
They're still working on it. I just put them to work.
So we're going to check back on that.
You check back next year.
So what's the criteria for a shaded view on fashion film? I mean, you evolve the festival every year in terms of the kinds of programs that you have, special programs. What does it take to get into a shaded view on fashion film?
Well, first of all, it's an open call. And every time I travel, like the director you showed me yesterday, every time I travel, one reason the festival travels is because I want to show the festival so that I can encourage local talent to contribute, because the festival is very international. It's judged, I make the first cut because I see probably 500 films, and I don't want my esteemed jury to have to sit through a lot of them.
So you watch every single film?
I watch every single film. Some, from the beginning, you might not last to the end. So I started and I wrote this 30 Ways to Win at ASVAB. And it also turned into things not to do, because I got so tired of looking at fashion films that were actually fashion shoots in motion. Like just the fact somebody's moving in front of the camera doesn't mean it's a film.
Or trying some kind of neat trick with a fisheye or something,
Oh,
and
yeah.
calling it, some experimental.
You're right.
fashion film.
My favorite is the mirror effect. It's like, do not use that mirror effect.
Although there is a mirror effect in the headpieces for peace, right?
I know there is one, but there are exceptions. There are always exceptions. But in general, I cannot look at it. I mean, I know how to edit on Final Cut Pro too, and I used all those barrels, mirror effect. But it's just, don't use effects because you don't have a good content.
Well, since this is kind of an unofficial call for submissions to any of you making films out there, what are the top three no-nos for a shaded view on fashion film?
Well, top three. Don't use models unless they can actually act. Get good technicians and have something to say before you make a film. and take me somewhere I've never been. And, it's like any other film, but if it's a short film, if you don't capture the attention of the viewer in the first 30 seconds, you're not going to. I look at a feature film like the first 7 minutes. But the film, there are different categories. There's the Short Film Festival, which goes from 30 seconds to 7 minutes. There's the Out of Competition, which is basically just longer. There's a documentary, which has no defined length, and feature films. And we like to give conferences and carte blanche, and we want to support directors as much as I've been supporting designers in the past 25 years.
So, speaking of people that you work with and people that help you through the selection process after you've been through your 500, you've had people like, Rosie De Palma, you've had Mike Figgis, you've had all kinds of different, you've had composers sort of across the gamut of the creative production process. Yeah. Michael Nyman. So, who gets to be a juror on a fashion film? Is it any different than a regular film festival? Or is there a particular thing that you look for in a jury member, like Manish Arora, for example?
I like to represent the world of fashion, the world of cinema, but we also have architects and artists. And, the way I look at it is we all watch films and we all wear clothes. And I want people whose opinions I really respect, and I'm always in awe of the quality of my jury members. You should be on the jury next time.
Hey, I'm all yours.
Okay, this is your official...
This is my official statement. If anybody wants to write it down, I'll come and sign it after this.
This is your official invitation.
Thank you, I'm flattered.
Great.
I want to talk about your influences, going back, because we were having this really interesting discussion about sort of a tendency to have a lot of female director representation in the festival, with by no science or criteria of your own. And we were talking about how some of your main influences, Werner Herzog, Cassavetes, Rainer Fassbender, are all male directors, and they've sort of shaped your film experience. How have they shaped your filter, your frame of reference, and how have they cascaded into the world of fashion?
I think over the past couple years, we've noticed all these major directors like David Lynch, Mike Figgis, Roman Polanski. He did that great film for Prada.
Who you did a cameo for.
Yeah, and
in The Ninth Gate.
Yeah, and he's actually... it's my obsession to get him for the next edition as my carte blanche, like I had Alejandro Jodorowsky and his family, his whole family, almost all of them, this year. Well, they're just films I've loved. Cassavetes, I've loved him for decades. He's dead, so I can't have him. But maybe I could get Gina Rollins. I don't know.
But you've had Zoe Cassavetes on...
yes, I had her on a jury, and I love Zoe. I couldn't help but say something stupid like, God, that blood running through your veins. But she was great.
DNA's got to count for something, right?
Yeah, no, she's great, actually. I really liked her. I don't know why it is that there's so many great women directors that end up winning prizes in ASVAV, because I'm always reading things on, do you read IndieWire?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love IndieWire.
I'm addicted to it.
Yeah, me too. And one of my jury members was one of the founders of IndieWire, Eugene Hernandez, who now works at Lincoln Center Film Society, and he's mastering getting us at Lincoln Center Film Society. He
kind of did this reverse journey of going from sort of deinstitutionalized setup to super institutionalized.
Exactly. He's an amazing, amazing person. Absolutely adore him. He's been on the jury twice, past 2 years. But, it just happens. These women make incredible films. And but when I read in IndieWire, they're always having all these women directors saying there's all these problems and women aren't represented fairly in as directors in the film industry, in the fashion film industry. That doesn't, personally, I don't see that as the case.
But you always have been sort of a disruptor, right, in your own right, whether it's, through your blog and through your film festival, the kinds of things that you've adopted you've always been interested in sort of shaking the system up, right, doing something different, and
Yeah.
I guess, that falls in line with this idea of, going against sort of the academy rules and sort of those regimented criteria and opening it up. So, it's a Diane Pernay way of doing things.
It is, it's my DNA.
Diana, you always talked about this idea of the emancipatory function of technology, and how blogs, back in the day, were sort of disrupting this idea, democratizing fashion. And you made this very bold statement about, you wish that one day the fashion film will take the place of the runway or the catwalk. So why do you feel that way?
Well, I don't think actually it's going to happen in the near future because there's too many incomes depending on a fashion show. And there are also many designers that, I was a designer myself for 13 years, so I know it's great when you see your work the way you envision it on the stage. But because I've seen so many fashion shows, and I think there's very few that really need a fashion show. I think most of them would be better served by a great film, an installation, the designer being with their collection, so you up close, talk to them, see the clothes. The catwalk shows get to be rather boring for the most part, and they're just, there are exceptions, there are always exceptions.
When there's, like the Chanel show last season, like the idea of, sort of setting it up like a performance or theatrical kind of installation, is that something that you feel breaks the mold a little bit?
Yeah, it's like, the old Alexander McQueen, or I love Rick Owens shows always. Jun Takahashi used to do really incredible shows. Now they're less incredible. But, the collection is really strong. It's not that the collection's weaker. It's just things get more, I don't know, just seeing people up and down the catwalk, to me there could be more. And a film gives you a few dimensions to work on. But I don't honestly see that the films are replacing catwalk shows in any time soon. And actually, I see that designers, instead of making a film and then doing an installation or being in the showroom, they make the film and they do the show. So that kind of defeats the point of they could have saved a lot of money, right, and just done one or the other. But they get nervous that if they do a film, they're going to miss a lot of press.
Nobody wants to miss out. They want to have the whole sort of gamut, right? So
yeah. So in the end, it goes in an opposite way that I was thinking.
But in terms of the films themselves, because now you can literally make a film on your phone. You can make, and I know a lot of directors would have my head for saying this, but these are films. At the end of the day, you can make a film on your iPhone. You can make films using all these different apps. Everybody has become a potential filmmaker. Has that made it a little bit harder to kind of shortlist from the fashion film world what is good, what's bad, or is it actually a good thing?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's like, if you have something to say, the technology makes it so easy now that anybody can make a film. But because it's not the high production value that makes the film worthwhile. Because it's like with anyone, I've had arguments, many arguments, with agents when I say they send me a really well-produced film. Well, they call it a film. To me, it's a fashion shoot in motion. And I'll say, the clothes are great, the styling's great, the lighting's great, but it's not a film.
There's no story.
There's nothing, And they're like, but it was shot with a red camera. I said, so what?
Yeah.
It's not, it could be shot with a mobile phone and it could be great.
Yeah,
if
good
you have
camera
something
never
to say.
good presentation never makes up for good content. I
Never,
mean, that still
no.
holds true.
Yeah.
But then again, do you think it's fair for sort of aspiring filmmakers or smaller brands that don't have access to the red cams, to the to the color correction crew, to the whole the well-funded aspects of making a really strong film, that are competing against these big brands that are making those fashion films on the same level?
Yeah, well, we had, like in Barcelona, we had just a mobile phone competition, and it was really great, actually. But I don't know, what's also funny is I have this really knowledgeable jury, and you have like really established directors, and it's always an unknown director that wins. It's never been, Bruce Weber, Ellen von Unworth, Mike Figgis.
Do you think that's sort of the ethos of the festival, kind of rooting for the underdog?
I don't think we're just looking for the talent,
Diane, tell me about sort of the genres that you have at the festival. You always talk about comedy and fashion taking itself too seriously. Why do you think there is an absence of humor and the absence of lightness of being in the fashion world and the fashion film world particularly?
Well, the fashion world in general takes itself far too seriously. And I think that's why when you see a film with a sense of humor, that's usually the film people love the most. These two films I showed were both Grand Prize winners, different years. Headpieces for Peace, it's great because it works on so many different levels. It's a political statement, a religious statement, a fashion statement, and it's got a great sense of humor.
I mean, it's a documentary as well, in a way, right?
Yeah.
These are real characters.
Yeah, and it's funny with that film because the girl Jessica Matrani, she'd submitted a film that was in my festival, I think in 2006 or 2007. Then she submitted a bunch of films in the years in between. They never got accepted. Then she submitted this. It was 6.5 minutes long. And I contacted her and I said, would you consider, because I looked at it and I thought, you can take a minute out of this film and it'll work. It'll probably work better. And so I told her, would you consider taking a minute out of it, or else I'll show it out of competition. But I'd really like to show it in competition. And she said, okay. She did it. She was really happy, and she won the grand prize.
So just listen to Diane.
Yeah.
Does it ever work the other way around? Where
Yeah.
filmmakers try to get you to reconsider your decisions or
Yeah,
their submission?
It did, actually. There was these two directors that made a film. It was in my festival. They had 5 short films that were commissioned by Lydia Camici for a museum in Marseille. And those films were absolutely fantastic by these directors. The next year they submitted a film. It got in. I was like halfway about it, but it got in. But the next year I said, if you want me to screen this film, can you lose the first minute of it? Because it's really boring, So, and you don't need it. It just was like 2 different films. And they got horrified, and they accused me of everything. Like, you're so unprofessional. And I was like, in my mind, I was just trying to help them. But, that way I'd screen their film. But in the end, I didn't screen their film, and they've never submitted another film. And nobody's ever heard of them since. But
I mean, there is no other fashion film festival like yours.
I'm kidding.
Diane, so as a closing sort of idea, I want to know where you think fashion films are going. What's the future looking like?
The future is I want more brands to use real directors because fashion films merit that. And I want the festival to be like a satellite to other film festivals as well, because there's a lot of talent. And like I said earlier, it's the thing about a feature film is going to take so long to get it off the ground, to get your sponsor and get your budget in place. It's a good way for great directors to also make an income and give us their great talent. I mean, I look at Polanski, what he did, it was great. David Lynch was less successful, I think. Martin Scorsese also. But there's a lot of great directors out there.
So any dream destinations for a shaded view on fashion?
Well, the next destination is Chicago. I'm getting I'm getting a honorary Legend of Fashion award, and also the Gene Siskel Theater is showing the festival, and we're still working on Cannes. We're looking for sponsors. Anybody here wants to sponsor Asvaf in Cannes? See me afterwards.
Well, actually, I'm gonna, shout out now to the audience to take part in this conversation. If you have any questions, if you're filmmakers, or any particular questions for Diane, please. There's a mic going around somewhere, right here.
Hi Diane, welcome to Dubai. I'm a fashion blogger and I've actually just directed and produced a short fashion film that was shot in Qatar, which we're hoping to submit to your festival.
Great.
I wanted to ask, apart from fashion film festivals, what do you think are the other platforms available for fashion filmmakers to get their work out there? Because it seems that theatrical distribution doesn't seem to be an option these days.
If you're a great director, I think you should make the film and maybe present it to the brand that you think your work corresponds with, I guess. I don't know, just make the films. And you have a reel, and then you try and get an agent if possible. Or you do it yourself, depends.
Absolutely. You actually, it's one of the films that I was struggling to keep out of the, to keep out of the program. We were very limited with this program in terms of the number of films we watched. If it was up to me and Diane, we would just kind of show films and, meet you guys later. But one of the films that I had the opportunity of watching was the To Be Honest film, directed by Mike Figgis. So could you tell us a little bit about the experience of launching your own fragrance and making the film?
Thank you. By the way, you can go to the Dubai Mall to a shop called Platora, and 3 days ago, my 4 perfumes just landed here. But I started the journey of the perfume like 3 years ago, and when we finally got ready to launch it, I thought it's not possible for me to create perfumes and not have a film. So I had as my special guest at the Champs-Élysées Film Festival last June, Mike Figgis and Rosie Chan, his girlfriend, who's a classical pianist. And we did a workshop. And we were having lunch afterwards, and I was talking about my perfumes to Mike, and he said, "So, you're going to need a film." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, call me." So I did. And I kind of gave him, I sent him tiny samples of the perfume. It was very difficult to get from my distributor. And I said, he knows me a bit because he's been in my festival for a couple years. He's been on the jury. And I kind of gave him a carte blanche to make the films. And I'm very happy. Because I figure if I'm going to have film, I better have a good director.
Why did you decide not to do it yourself?
Well, I am certainly not of the quality of Mike Figgis. It would have been a different story. It would have been a lo-fi kind of fun film, but, I wanted something a bit more.
Well, maybe that will be sort of the exclusive edition of the fashion of the fragrance films.
Yeah.
A question right here at the front.
I've been an advertising creative for about 10 years now. More and more, whenever we're actually briefed with a TV commercial, I find myself referencing my junior creatives with fashion films. Because they seem to be opening this realm of a longer time, let's say. So instead of a 30-second film, you're actually talking about a 2-minute film. You're talking about a better story construction, and you're talking about characters that actually can develop themselves in a certain emotion. But it might be a personal question, but I find myself, the more I deal with fashion film, the more I kind of go, well, maybe I like fashion more than advertising. So in your place, you were a fashion designer, a stylist, an editor, and when you were actually professionally doing this, there was no realm of fashion film. And you sort of, got that all together and packaged it in a way. So I'm actually wondering, when you were a fashion designer, did you ever had a moment where you said, this is not for me, there's something more, I gotta do something else?
It's really funny because my degree is in filmmaking. And then I studied fashion only for 9 months, and I quit because I thought, if I stay in school any longer, I'm going to lose all desire to design. And I've always had two things I really love since I was really little, since going to a drive-in movie, seeing, Bambi. I was like, this is it, So life has always been kind of cinematic to me. And putting together, so I designed for my own brand for 13 years. Then I did costume design, styling, journalism, creating the blog and platforms. And for me, like putting together the film festival is like a completing the circle. It's everything I love together. And I can support fashion and I can support film. And sometimes I make little lo-fi films. I did a little one on Mr. Pearl. It's kind of cute. But you couldn't ever see him because he doesn't want to be seen. But he talks really freely. It's Dita Von Teese does a little testimonial for him. You can see it online. It's on my YouTube account, Mr. Pearl. But I think it's nice to experiment with all the different media. And I'm really happy you said that the fashion films are a starting point. That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions? I mean, I could keep doing this for another 2 hours and, keep watching films. So if you want to stick around, we could do that. Or, I can close by thanking you very, very much for being here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And I want to take this opportunity to do a special shout out to Tima Uzden, the editor of Gazette, who made this all possible. They recently launched their website, so check it out. It's Gazette, thegazette.me. And to Ramzi Nakad, the COO of Fashion Forward, for making this wonderful event happen. Thank you again, Diane, and see you in Paris.
Yeah. Thank you for being on the jury.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.